One, if you are a Republican or Democrat or centered between the two, your ideas are in power. Your view of things and the common sense compromises and petty reforms that you think are original to you are probably all already either in place or dismissed due to evidence that you haven't seen by people who think exactly like you but have more time and access to more information than you do. And so a lot of these little petty reforms that you think are, why aren't they doing this? Well, either they're already in place and you don't know it, or they have seen more information, more evidence, and are not putting it in place because they have access to more information than you do and have spent more time on the issue than you have, even though they think basically like you. Or another way to think of it is that other versions of you are in Congress right now, and the differences between you and Congress are not as big as you think, if there are any differences at all. Even though you will say that you hate Congress and you imagine in your mind that you are significantly different from Congress, which you're not. Two, they are failing. As it turns out, the unemployment from 2008 appears to be structural. Of course, in the government numbers, they're not going down. But of course, we know that the labor force participation rate has dropped in the year 2008 and is not recovering. If you think that it's not structural, well then, it's been about 6 years. Just tell us how long you think the dip in the employment rate, or the labor force participation rate, must remain until it is recognized as structural and not transient. How long till we recognize that it's structural? 3, the politicians elected are not a result of money in elections. Money does in fact correlate with winners, which is to say winning candidates receive more donations on average because more excitement tends to get more money, but that's not always the case. Romney raised more than Obama, yet Obama won. There's lots of examples of candidates who raise less money but still won. And money is just a weak indicator of how excited people are for the candidates. But money is also an indicator for how wealthy a politician's constituency is. A politician that caters to a wealthy constituency can get a lot of money but not a whole lot of votes. Money itself may at most be able to create a 5-point swing, which is plus 2.5% for one candidate, minus 2.5% for another. So that's a 5-point swing, at the upper end. Right? Usually, it's less than 1%. Now, the policies that are enforced by politicians are best explained by public opinion over time on salient issues. Salient issues being issues that voters care about. Okay, voters don't care about sugar subsidies. That's why lobbyists tend to win on those. If the voters don't care about the issues, that's where the lobbyists can win. Right? When the voters do care about it, the lobbyists are basically powerless. What I'm saying here is that democracy is in fact working. Okay. It's profitable to sell some other explanation, to say that lobbyists are ruining it all, or some new world order is ruining it all, or some, you blame the Republicans, blame the Rush Limbaugh crowd. Okay. There's all sorts of people willing to sell you something, right? And these kinds of things sell because they're answers to the question, why are things falling apart, without having to deal with your fundamental faith in the United States, right? It's a way to explain things falling apart in the United States without fundamentally questioning the civic religion. Okay, and that's why they get so far. Okay, it's also, right, the reason, and this goes to number 4, the reason the U.S. is in decline is the same reason the USSR was in decline. It is a bad system, right? It is a bad system which is being faithfully implemented, producing bad results. This is the simplest explanation. The Soviet Union, this is something that most people don't understand, but in the poll, the last poll up to the partition of the Soviet Union, over 70% of the people in the Soviet Union supported maintaining the Soviet Union. Okay, they thought the system could be reformed. They believed that that it was a good idea, but that it was just being incompetently run by a bunch of boobs. Okay, in Scientology, the first universally, everyone who gets out of Scientology explains or says that at the very beginning they still believed in Scientology. They just thought it was a bunch of boobs running the show. They believed that L. Ron Hubbard had great ideas, and that Scientology did in fact work, and the fact that it wasn't working for them was evidence that they were not getting Scientology, that it was these boobs in the church of Scientology that were causing all the problems, that the belief system itself was actually very good. It was just that these idiots in charge were screwing it all up. Okay, that's what's believed in the Soviet Union, and that is what was believed in the Soviet Union, and that is what is believed regarding the United States. Okay, and so in all three, they would invoke all sorts of sophisticated boogeymen to blame their problems on anything but the fundamental system itself. The problems for the United States go back to the Constitution and the founding and the idea of representative democracy itself. Okay, that's where the problems goes. You look at every country on the planet, Canada, United States, Australia, even the so-called paradises in Scandinavia, Britain, France, Germany, Italy. They all have identical problems, and they're all representative democracies, aka republics. Okay, so when you see this sort of universal thing happening, right, it's time to start blaming the system itself. Right, it's time to start blaming democracy, which means republicanism. Right, that's what the United States is. It's a democracy, a democratic republic, representative democracy. Right, which is the most common form of democracy and is what democracy means, and it's the original form of democracy. Okay, so that's it. That's the simplest explanation. 5. The Republican Party and Democrat Party are identical on economic, foreign policy, social, and racial issues. Both are fully integrationist in terms of race. Both Republicans and Democrats support gay marriage. Right? There's a meaningless issue regarding what to call gay marriage. Right? Republicans want to call it civil unions. Okay, but the practical issue of gay marriage has been settled. Both support non-European immigration in identical degrees, and they both have identical taxing and spending platforms, and they both engage in as many hegemony wars throughout the world as they can get away with. Right? Obama was trying to push to get involved in Syria. But there was a public backlash. So what you see is both Bush and Obama pushed for foreign policy up to the maximum of what the general public would tolerate. Right. So we see an identical. Right. That both parties will push for foreign intervention as much as the public will tolerate. Yeah. And this is not just a fashionable thing to say. The data bears it out. If you look at the spending increases by Republican and Democrat presidents on domestic things, not just defense things. Right? Reagan expanded the domestic economy. Bush expanded the domestic economy at a rate more than Clinton did. Okay, so right, the data bears this out. This is not. I mean, it's a little bit fashionable to say that Republicans and Democrats are the same. But this is one of the rare instances in which the fashionable thing to say also is the true thing to say. Okay. If you vote Republican or Democrat, or if you identify with Republican or Democrat, it is the same thing. Both are the system and both are in power. There is no other side to blame. Okay, there is no other side to blame. It is one governing philosophy that is completely in power. To the extent that there are any differences, they're worth mentioning in the same way that the differences between Calvinists and Lutherans are worth mentioning, which is to say actual Republicans and Democrats may care about the differences between them, but anyone outside of the U.S. civic religion recognize them as being as identical as Methodists and Baptists. 6. In order to have any substantial social or economic recovery, new ideas must be implemented. The current political system, referring here to the courts, Congress, and executive laid out by the Constitution and faithfully enacted, is not capable of implementing new ideas, right? I'm not talking about lobbyists or the particular politicians or New World Order or anything. I'm talking about the Supreme Court, the Congress, and the executive as institutions through time. Okay, as institutions through time. I'm talking about the basic system set up by the founders that is, in fact, being faithfully executed. Okay, that is being faithfully implemented. All right, that's what I'm talking about here. Okay. The population of the United States will not agree on new ideas. Okay, and this is something that even if some radical group gains steam, such as like libertarians and the Ron Paul movement, this probably won't have any effect because like the kinds of people who become become Ron Paul supporters or become / libertarians, basically the same thing, they are already more fiscally, what is called fiscally conservative. They're already more fiscally conservative than the median voter anyway. So if you can look at a one-dimensional spectrum on fiscal conservatism, they're already to the right of the median voter, and so they then support Ron Paul. Well, they just go further to the right, and that's fine, but that doesn't matter because the median voter stays where he is. They're already to the right of the median. They just move further. They may move the average towards the average views of people in the United States towards more fiscally conservative views, but the median stays where it is, and that's what wins election, right? That's where politicians go, right? Because politicians, if you vote for Obama like really fervently, okay, well that's one vote. And whereas someone who votes for Romney, kind of like, lesser of two evils, I guess I'll pick Romney. Okay, that's one vote too. Now, if you average, like say you're a fiery Obama supporter and you're a very lukewarm Romney supporter, okay, well average those out. The average will be, more favorable towards Obama because you're more pro-Obama than he is pro-Romney. But that doesn't matter, right? Because you both have one vote. And even if the average moves in a certain direction, because the pro-free marketers become more fervent and more radical in their belief, okay, well that changes the average belief of the United States, but the median voter stays where he is, okay, and the median voter is still right in the middle, and so that's what politicians want to get at. Politicians want to get at the median voter, and that's what policy is going to be. And so policy remains the same even if, all right, and so that's why all these little movements here, in all these various directions are not going to have any effect because they don't push the median voter. What they do is they push people who are already on one side or another of the political spectrums on various issues, and they just move them further along that spectrum. They don't actually move the median voter. Right, and that's why policy remains the same. 7. Given that the United States will not agree on new ideas, and that new ideas of some kind are required for any kind of recovery, there will be no recovery within the United States as we know it. Thus, recovery is only possible if the United States is dissolved in such a way that new ideas are able to be implemented. Now, there's not enough ideological diversity between the states for the partition on the basis of traditional state lines to have any meaningful effect. If the U.S. is partitioned on the basis of geographic regions such as the Pacific Coast, the former Confederate States, the Northeast, red state, blue state, okay, those populations will simply be smaller continuations of the United States and will not actually solve the problems in front of them. The differences between red state and blue state public opinion are not enough to enable new ideas to be implemented in either section. Right? Both are going to be basically identical carbon copy continuations of the United States writ small, right? Which leads to the conclusion. The United States must be partitioned on the basis of ideological regions, regions assigned to ideologies with people in the wrong zones being deported out. Right? It's going to require population transfers. Right? Population transfers. And if you think that this is authoritarian, well, you know what? I think U.S. foreign policy is authoritarian. If you think such a plan is bad because you don't want to move, okay, well, try telling that to the families of the 1.5 million people killed as a result of U.S. intervention in Afghanistan and Iraq. Sorry your son was killed, but it would be really fucking inconvenient for me to move and find a new job. Even though the fact that so many people are moving as a result of this partition, that companies are systematically relocating, which makes finding a new job easier than it would be under normal moving circumstances, it's still kind of inconvenient because the kids have to go to a new school, make new friends, and right. That's really what it is. Okay, and so NSA, DHS, right, structural unemployment that's not going to be resolved, killing people around the world, right, collapsed currency, collapsed economic prospects, regression of the United States towards the median of the rest of the world. Okay, you know, I'll tolerate all that because I don't want to move. All right, and that's something that's permanent. Right, something that's going to go that's going to cost you through the ages. Well, I don't want to move one time to a new area. Right, I'd rather consign, you know, my kids and their grandkids to, you know, a second world status, a declining United States, right, something unexceptional. Right. And of course, all the shittiness that will go on in the remainder of my life, plus, you know, all the shit that the United States does around the world as a military hegemon. Right, I'm going to keep all that because I don't want to move one time. Right, I don't want to have to find new work and new friends and new school and all that. Right, I don't want to move one time. Okay. About 6% of the U.S. population moves between states each year. Okay? So say 1/3 of the U.S. population has to move as a result of the partition. Okay, well that would be just 5.5 times the annual rate. Right? A lot of people look at population transfers and they go, oh, India, Pakistan. Well, you know what? The United States is nothing like India in 1948. It's nothing like India today, let alone India in 1948. People aren't tied to their land for farming, and people are much more mobile. They have cars they can move. Right? America doesn't work. It is a bad idea in terms of its government system and the idea that such an area should be a single country. There is one way out, and that is ideological partition. Parochial partition, right, Texas or Vermont, is pointless. Now, you can sit here and claim that an ideological partition is a pipe dream. Okay? But that's irrelevant because it is the only way out. It's like being trapped in a cave, and the only way out is a horribly tiny crevice that must be painstakingly widened with whatever you can get to try to widen that crack open and grind your way to the surface. Right? You can say that it won't up, that we will run out of air before that way is opened up. Okay, and that may be true. Nevertheless, there it is, the only way out. And so the practical difficulty of creating a front, right, a front being multiple ideological groups working together for a common goal, right, dedicated to breaking up the United States, the practical difficulty of this is, for the most part, irrelevant, because it's all there is. There is no other way out of the cave. It's all that there is to do.